welcome back to the Cultivating Calmness podcast. I am going to talk to you today about my very first myofascial release massage. I finally did it. I got a massage from somebody local, and I will talk a little bit about that today. I have been working with trauma patients for quite a few years, and in my private practice for about 4 years now. And I've been building and talking about your body and how your body kind of keeps the score. There's a good book about that if you haven't read it. But I talk about that with my clients, especially when I'm doing things like EMDR and I'm just seeing a lot of movement and stuff happening in their body. And we know that the things that happen in your body or happen to you, so it could be physical traumas or emotional traumas that happen to you, those things can get stored throughout your body for different reasons. And we may see those things come out in different ways, in your daily life. And we often can see it happen during trauma treatment of any kind. So I have several clients that come to mind when I think about the work that we're doing together and the movements that they kind of make in session and some of the traumas that I'm aware of versus, some of the body movements that I see, or even, some of the things that I'm not really seeing, but I just really suspect that they are there. And I often recommend to them some kind of body work, right? That could be a massage, that could be chiropractic care or physical therapy or some kind of, maybe manipulation, even if that's just exercise in some way, shape, or form and getting the body moving. But also there is fascia work. And before we could even get into what any of those things are, before I can talk to you about what a myofascial massage is, we have to understand what fascia is. And fascia is not something that I think many people are really well aware of. We know that we have our bones and we have our muscles, but the fascia is really like that connective tissue that holds everything else together. And doing a little bit of research, one of the sites called it like a wetsuit for, all of your body and your body systems. And it, helps to, like, it wraps around your muscles, your bones, your nerves, your organs. It wraps around all of that, and it keeps all of those things in the right place. But we can damage or cause stress and trauma to our fascia, and then our fascia can tighten, just like we might feel our muscles tighten. Or actually, what you may think are your muscles getting really tight could actually be the fascia at work here. And so that fascia is that underlying stuff that's going on. And oftentimes, not all the time, the people that you're going to see, say, for like a deep tissue massage, they may be working on some of that fascia from what I've learned. And I could be wrong. I don't know everything, but it sounds a lot like, in looking at some research and, talking to the person who I got my massage from, that the fascia isn't always the thing that's taught. So people out there who are doing some of this work may not actually know or be able to tell what maybe some of those differences are between muscle and fascia. And I couldn't tell you what the difference is, but I can tell you, I have had many massages in my life, and I tend to go for the deep tissue massage. I don't like the light and fluffy, gentle massages. I kind of am like, why am I here if you're going to do that? Like, I want the, deep tissue. I want to get the work done. And yes, it's a little painful, but I know that on the back end, I am going to feel much better after they can get to whatever the pain source is. Now, I might decide that I want a myofascial massage instead of just a deep tissue massage, because I'm gaining this better understanding of why some of those things, like why you're experiencing some of that pain and discomfort in your body. So fascia is a good source of that structure and support throughout your body, and really holds everything together. And so I mentioned, bones and tissues and organs even. So I actually learned in the last several years from multiple different sources that you can actually get your organs adjusted. And you can get your organs adjusted because they are your fascia is part of that and helps to keep them in place. But your organs, from what I've learned, should have some movement to them. So if your uterus, I'm going over here, your liver, which is on this side, is like stuck, right? There's no movement in it. That, from what I'm told, would be a bad thing. It does need to have a little bit of, it needs to be able to move within its area. We don't want it to be stiff. And that could be because of the fascia, that something has happened and the fascia has tightened up, in that area, causing it to be immobile. I learned several, I don't think it was last year, maybe in the year before, about like a tilted uterus and how, fascia can be part of, a reason for having a tilted uterus, which I did find out that, that's something that I have. And so there can be lots of causes to that. The fascia being like one of the, I don't know if you call it culprits or reasons, but something has happened to your body, or maybe multiple somethings, childbirth, even just being still all the time, not moving around, having that sedentary maybe lifestyle where you're not getting a lot of movement, can cause problems with your fascia. So when you have like organs that aren't freely moving within their space, like you don't want your liver like shifting and going somewhere else completely in your body, that would also be bad. But it's supposed to be within its area and have some of those gentle like movements, from what I'm told. And fascia is part of that. So you can adjust things and move things and treat the fascia, and you may notice that release of some of that tension that you're experiencing. So fascia and, I think trauma have a lot to do with each other. Again, we often think of trauma as, those PTSD related things, but trauma can be those physical traumas. You were in an accident, or if you had a C-section, that would be a trauma to your body, and potentially an emotional, mental trauma as well. And the body can hold on to that, and it forms scar tissue. Anytime you have a surgery, your body likely does or can form scar tissue, and the scar tissue affects the fascia. So an example that I've known about for a while is, say you get that C-section, right? It's cut across and it goes through, I don't remember how many layers to get down into your organ, your uterus. And so like that's being cut open as well. And then it's being sewn up, and then it has to heal. Well, that fascia is being disrupted on many levels. So often people who complain of potentially lower back pain, even shoulder pain, potentially maybe pain elsewhere, could be having a reaction to that fascia that is tightening and pulling in on that scar tissue, and you want to be able to get in there and release it. So it's just tightening and pulling and like getting into like knots when it should be able to release and be more open. And you might, then be able to have more of that free movement. You may then notice that the lower back pain or the shoulder pain or something is gone. The person who did my massage talked about somebody who had, I can't remember the exact area. I think, he was having stiffness in lots of areas in his body. And in doing the work and doing the fascial release, what she was trained to do, and what many, from what I'm told, are trained to do, is you kind of follow the path that is kind of giving you. So she can feel that. And she's, starts somewhere and she'll like feel maybe a knot or some tension or pulling. She'll kind of follow it along a path and try to release that path. And what she found was she was noticing with this person that there was like tightness like under the rib, and asked them like what happened. Well, they had been involved in a sport in high school, and this was like several decades later. This person's older than me. I've been dealing with pain for decades. and had found out that he had had an injury near or on or around his ribs, and that fascia was leading to that area. And they were able to do some of that work, and that pain started to subside and go away, because the fascia was like pulling down into that area from all around and causing this pain he was experiencing in and around whatever the area was in his body. So that is kind of the effect that fascia can have. So I want to talk a little bit about, my experience and what I kind of felt going through that massage. But before I do that, fascia is, I talked about trauma and, my clients and seeing some of that. So fascia can act kind of like a sponge. It can absorb some of those traumas that you have. And I know that kind of seems like a little woo-woo, but it's true. I've seen people talk about it. I experienced a little bit of it myself. And, the massage therapist that I spoke with also talked about people who had those experiences. It can be a lot of emotional release when you are releasing some of those things that have been retained in your muscles and in your fascia. So it's not just your fascia that holds on to stuff, but since it is that kind of connective tissue all around your body, it's probably going to hold on to a lot of the stuff you've experienced. And that can be like emotions, fear, stress, grief, etc. And it can then cause those physical symptoms that you may be experiencing. And it really disrupts, the trauma can disrupt that fascia-brain connection. And we call that kind of that interoception. That's that the way that we experience emotions, the way we understand emotions, how they present itself. Just when I'm angry, what does anger feel like in my body? Do I recognize what it's feeling like? Do I recognize what's happening in my body when I'm angry? Or am I just calling it anger and that's it? Right? So that's that interoception, if I'm getting that correct. And, I could be conflating things. So I think that is the most concise way to describe that. So, all right, so I want to talk a little bit about what I experienced. I went to a place in town called Center Wellness, and they do a massage there and a lot of other things that they have. They have red light therapies, sauna. They have the like ice cold plunge. They do what they call like fire and ice, where you can do both. Which I've done. They have a salt cave, which is really awesome. And one day I want to have one of those. And you just go in there and breathing in kind of the pink Himalayan salt can be really helpful and soothing for illness as well as other things. And they have some kind of, not a float spa. They have this like brain wave type of device that can help with, kind of regulating mood. They have some other things. So they have a lot of things there. And then in addition to that, they have massage, and then they also have some like wellness things in their lobby and like healthy foods and healthy snacks. So it's a great place, in the Plain City, Dublin area. And so that's where I went. And like I said, it was similar to a massage that you may have had, but also very different. So I have the general idea of what, to expect going into this. And, I have a general idea of like, not more than a general idea of like what trauma is and, how to maybe be more present for this massage. It wasn't one where I was just going to fall asleep and she was going to do some massage. I would say, fully active in the process. And what I mean by that is I knew it was likely to be painful, not just maybe physically, but maybe emotionally. So to be honest, I felt like they're going into it. I was a little maybe worried, like, ooh, what could be released here? And I was trying to like mentally prepare myself to just go with the flow, right? Just be present and breathe through it and allow to happen what needs to happen. And so for me, it was a lot of just being very present and intentional during the whole thing, and a lot of breathing and focused breathing. So focusing on breathing in slowly and breathing out. And when it was painful, it was, breathing through my mouth. And sometimes that involved like heavier breathing, like a deeper breath. Sometimes I made noises with that, like, like it was, trying to just put, like, I don't say push through it, but allow whatever needed to happen. And so that was part of something that I was doing throughout the whole process. And I was aware of that. And I was trying to like mentally remind myself, like, just breathe and feel it, and be aware. And I think, for me, maybe that was helpful. So if this is something you're interested in, to maybe really think about that, because it can release, not just the physical pains. It can be, painful, but it can also maybe release some emotional stuff. And I noticed some of the emotional stuff. I can't remember. Well, I don't know how long it was inside. I wasn't watching the clock, but I would say within a short time frame of getting started, there are definitely tears started to flow, and I couldn't explain why. It wasn't because I was in pain, like physical pain. I mean, there was some painful moments, but again, nothing that was like super painful where I couldn't tolerate it. And I think I've experienced worse with deep tissue massages, to be honest. But there were definite tears coming, and I wasn't stopping them. I just tried to let it happen. And the key difference here is, I wasn't like laying still. Like in a massage, if you've ever been to one, you're usually either like face down or face up, or both. They may start you in one direction and have you roll over and go into the other direction. I was face up the entire time for this one. And she's, started, I think she started up here on my left side, and she started working, my neck and my like kind of shoulder area. And then, kind of quickly went up like into my face. So one of the things I told her that I have going on is I have tinnitus in my one ear. And I'd had that for 7 or 8 years or so. And I'm pretty certain I know how and why that started, and, which could be related to a lot of fascia, which I actually didn't make that connection. So when she started working a lot in this area, my neck was being moved like all over, and my jaw was like being manipulated and moved. And, in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what's going to happen to my jaw here? But I trusted her, and I knew I was in good hands. But that was a little painful, a lot of pressure points, so my body was being like moved around a lot. Whereas in a traditional massage, like, you may lay there and lay back, and, if your arms are on your stomach or on your side, you're probably not moving very much. I was moving a lot. My arm, was like up and moving. And then when she got down into like further down into my body, one of the things I did notice was, that following kind of the fascia for me. That definitely happened for me, where it would start up here, and then she would kind of move down and follow. And, then before I know it, she's like in my hips, and then, moving down into my like thighs and my legs. And then my leg is like up in the air and moved and twisted. And, I was like, man, if I could be like a fly on the wall watching this, I wonder what I looked like. I was moving all around, but I was really just trying to be focused on like, what is that feeling? And there was another point later on, I would say probably near the end, where I had, some tears again, and not pain. But I think it was more emotions coming out. And there was a point in time where the only way I can describe it is kind of like what somebody might experience with EMDR. So people have described it as like flashes of maybe memories, like you're going by in a really fast train and you're just watching the images go by. There was a moment where that happened for me, and I was just seeing a bunch of like really fast like pictures. And the only thing I can attribute that to is, maybe there's some kind of like release related to that when that happened. Or maybe it was just something that was on my mind. I can't exactly say. But I did experience, some, I'll say, intense emotions in that moment and, near the end. And for me, she did tell me she was able to release a lot. She felt the release, but there were some places where we got close, but she wasn't quite able to release. And so that could be for many reasons. And one for me may have been like my body wasn't ready to let that go, or my mind. It could be both, So I was trying to remain open and allow like things to happen. But sometimes our body is like, protection. And it's like, oh, I'm not ready to let go of that yet. So it's important to, do this multiple times, just like therapy. You don't go to one session and you're done. We want to go again and have some regularity to that. And so my hope is that when I go back, whatever that stuck area was, that we may be able to have more progress with that, in addition to maybe whatever else needs to happen there. So that was my experience in getting a myofascial release. And some of the side effects of having a myofascial release can be similar to like a massage, where you may have some tenderness, some pain. Things may feel worse before they get better. And we see that in trauma therapy as well, because we've kind of sometimes opened a floodgate or opened a door that had been previously closed. And so some of those things may start to seep out. The same thing can happen with the myofascial releases and massages, is that they're opening pathways that have been closed. They're, releasing tension that had previously maybe been holding on to something and has like kind of let that out into your body, even with like toxins and things like that. So that's why it's important to drink water and rest and, eat good food and, maybe take some like Epsom salt baths, or potentially, maybe do a sauna or something like that. But also I was instructed, right, whatever you do to kind of relax and calm down, to do those things following the massage, and that you can have some of that emotional healing in the like 24 to 48, maybe 72 hours following your massage. And I did experience, I would say within like 48 hours, some emotional stuff. And again, I could have been just stuff going on at home, but also I did contribute it to a little bit of some of that maybe emotional release going on. There was a point in time within that 24-ish hours mark where I just felt like there was stress, stressful things happening. And then I just felt like I have to get out of here, and so I, ended up leaving the house and just going out for a little bit. Nothing terrible. I went shopping and got some things done, but like I felt better by the time I came home. That didn't solve the problem by any means. But I contributed that to many factors, not just, maybe the massage, but also just life in general. But had I maybe not had the massage, I maybe would not have experienced some of those feelings. So, if you are considering a fascia, getting some fascia work done, just to be aware that it can release some things in your system and in your life that maybe you aren't prepared for. So that can be something that maybe other people have experienced, just like trauma. If we jump too quickly into that trauma, sometimes it releases those floodgates and we're not ready to handle it. And I'm like, whoa, I can't go back to therapy. It was terrible. It ruined my life because we just like, it was like, sending you into the wolves when we didn't maybe prepare you for it. So I felt maybe like I was a little more prepared for that. If you're working with a therapist, for example, and my clients who maybe are working with me, if I know like we've been doing this work, they have good coping skills, we've worked through some of that stuff, it might be a good idea to see somebody to work on some of that fascia. And we may see more of that progress in our therapy. And then they may see some of that progress just in their life as a whole, because we're kind of doing that work in tandem. So I think that would be a great connection to make. If you are in therapy, you may also consider this like kind of idea of fascia work to see how that can complement the work you're doing in therapy. So thank you all for joining me. I hope you learned a little bit of something. I know I did, and finally being able to experience it. And I wanted to share it with you. Have a wonderful rest of your life.